Exciting news for nursing professionals. Maximus is actively hiring and wants you to join their team. Whether you're an experienced nurse or just starting your healthcare journey, there's a perfect spot waiting for you. Experience a supportive and dynamic work environment, abundant growth opportunities, and collaboration with a passionate team. Don't miss this chance to make a remarkable impact on lives. Apply now at maximus.com/NYIA and embark on a rewarding career journey.
Content warning, this episode contains discussion of the sexual abuse of children, including child sexual abuse materials.
So today is May 18th, 2023. This is the date that was scheduled for Kegan Kline to receive his sentence on the counts that he pled guilty to last month. We went to that hearing today in Peru, Indiana. Actually, we're still in Peru, Indiana. Mm-hmm. And very, very briefly, what happened?
Well, there was no sentencing hearing. Kegan didn't get sentenced. Basically, what happened was the defense got a continuance, and we'll have to check back in July to see basically what happens.
So what happened? What does this all mean? Well, we were here for the whole thing, and we're trying to talk you through all of our experiences.
And what it means for Kegan Kline's case going forward. My name is Anya Kane. I'm a journalist.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee. I'm an attorney.
We first connected while looking into the Burger Chef murders, an Indiana cold case. Together, we built a spreadsheet documenting hundreds of cases of restaurant-related homicides. That original spreadsheet gave way to our podcast, The Murder Sheet.
Now we maintain that same research-centric, investigative approach as we look into all sorts of homicides, including unsolved cases, historical crimes, and, of course, restaurant murders.
We don't just chat about the headlines. Our podcast is a platform for our journalism. The Murder Sheet focuses on investigative reporting, thoughtful analysis, thorough research, and in-depth interviews.
We're the Murder Sheet, and this is...
The Delphi Murders, the Kegan Kline sentencing hearing that wasn't.
So I guess the first indication that you and I got that maybe things wouldn't proceed quite as planned was last night.
Yeah.
What occurred was, you may remember, I think it was last Tuesday, that we did an episode that featured some comments from Kegan Kline's ex-girlfriend. With our permission, one of the local news affiliates ran a news story about that interview and shared some of the information from it. Kegan contacted us via text to share his concerns about that. And since we all knew what was going to happen today, or what was scheduled to happen today, we wrote him, "Are you dreading tomorrow?" And he wrote back, "I just got some discovery this morning I should have seen 3 years ago and haven't until today. I can't say what's going to happen tomorrow."
Can you explain why discovery, Kevin, before we get into the specifics of this case, why discovery is so important in any criminal case?
You know, criminal trials are not like a game. It's not supposed to be something where you can pull a rabbit out of your hat and surprise someone. It's very important that the person charged is fully aware of exactly what he's charged with and what information the state has that it feels proves those charges. That it's very, very important. And so what Kegan was alleging there was pretty serious.
Yes. And Well, I think at the time when we saw that text from him, I think we both were a little bit, wondering if things would go without a hitch, with the sentencing hearing in the morning. And I think we both kind of got the feeling that maybe it wouldn't.
And another factor, Kegan didn't say this, but I think we all remember last week, prosecutor Jennifer Kiefer, who works with the Miami County Prosecutor's Office, wrote a pretty detailed and convincing brief arguing that Kegan Kline could receive a pretty hefty sentence.
We calculated it up to, I think, 45 years at least, if the kind of the maximum punishment was meted out.
This brief was very well written, it was very well organized, and it was convincing.
Yeah, and I mean, I just want to shout that brief out for a second. I mean, there were citations. It was very, very thorough. And I imagine to someone like Kegan Kline, who's maybe facing that and looking at that in depth, scary.
Yes, I'm sure if Kegan read that brief, it probably, for lack of a better word, freaked him out a bit.
Yeah.
So that may also be something at play here.
If we had to speculate, I'm sure that's not a non-factor. The fact that it's finally, because for years, I think for at least us for a long time, it's been a bit unclear about what sort of punishment he could see. Would it be just a few years? Would he kind of get sentences? Would he be serving terms consecutively or concurrently? There's so many factors, and that remains unclear. But when you're basically looking at worst case scenario, 45 years, I mean, that's a hard time. That is a long sentence. And I mean, frankly, we did the math, and we kind of didn't even include some of the counts in that. And so, I mean, that's a heavy situation. So that could definitely change somebody's mind.
Yes, it certainly could.
And people, are often talking about like, well, what about the plea agreement? What about a plea agreement in this case? There's no plea agreement. The prosecution has not made any sort of plea agreement with Kegan Kline. He basically got up and said, I want to plead guilty, no deals. And that's what happened. There's no deal to speak of here.
Yeah, the prosecutor in charge of this case is Courtney Allwine. Of course, she works under County Prosecutor Jeff Singovics. And she has made it very clear that she was not the least bit interested in making any sort of a plea deal with Kegan Kline. If he wanted to plead guilty, he would just have to plead guilty and take his chances. And then after Kegan Kline saw that brief, he probably thought, maybe my chances aren't as good as I hoped.
Yeah, if he was hoping for something where he would get like 8 years, I'm not saying that can't happen, but we are saying that the Kiefer memo, the Kiefer sort of pre-sentencing memorandum essentially, highlighted a scenario where he could be getting quite a lot more than that. And also, yeah, I mean, we have a prosecution that's not willing to make deals. Oftentimes, plea deals are a good tool for both the defense and the prosecution to use because it kind of minimizes the risk for both sides and allows for compromise. But in this case, they're not interested in compromising with Kegan Kline. They're just not. I mean, I can understand that. I mean, the seriousness and prolific nature of some of these charges and what he's alleged to have done make it so, like, I don't know if there is much political will in Miami County to want to settle and get a lighter sentence for someone who is alleged to have done these things.
So with all of that in mind, we woke up early this morning and sped to Peru.
Kevin's calling me out because we literally, like a mile from the courthouse, I got pulled over. I was driving too fast. That's fair to say. And so the state trooper who pulled me over was very much in the right, and I'm not going to complain about it, but it was awful because I've never been pulled over before. So we literally sped up here for you guys so you could get this podcast. He was very nice, did not give me a ticket because it was my first time getting pulled over, but frankly, he was in his rights too, and so I salute, the ISP, the Peru post, my new favorite ISP post. Sorry about that. I will. It's a good lesson. Don't speed. Don't go too fast. Drive safely. Even if you want to get to a hearing really early for no reason because it doesn't even open until 9 a.m. and you're there an hour early, sitting awkwardly in the hallway, making everyone feel uncomfortable.
And in fairness, I had a bit of a run-in myself with a member of law enforcement. When you go into the courtroom, you have to empty out your pockets and go through, somebody wands you. And a very friendly deputy kidded me a bit because when I emptied my pockets, I pulled out my wallet and then I had a bunch of wadded up bills, dollar bills. And she said, that's what your wallet is for.
I was like, that's Kevin's ill-gotten gains. I thought you were going to start pulling out one of those like clown things where it's like the handkerchiefs all tied together. But then I can't talk because my pockets are the same. And I was like laughing at you. So that was embarrassing.
So then we go into the courtroom, and one thing that is apparent pretty quickly, and this isn't a surprise because the Miami County Prosecutor's Office under Jeff Sigovics is very well run, is very professional. They always do things very thoroughly. And it appeared as if they had arranged kind of a murderer's row of potential witnesses to offer evidence in this sentencing hearing today. We saw several members of the Indiana State Police. I imagine these people were prepared to offer detailed and probably disturbing testimony about the nature of the CSAM material that Kegan was involved with.
Can we say who we saw specifically, or at least the ones we recognized?
Sure.
We saw specifically Jerry Holman of ISP and Dave Vito of ISP. And we know Vito in particular, he is the person who was interrogating or interviewing Kegan in the transcripts that we released from August 2020. So he's obviously highly involved in this case. I feel bad for all these people given what happened because, when you're prepared to testify about something really sickening and horrible and then, just gets put off again, I can't imagine that's very nice to have to deal with.
And also, I think a lot of us, certainly Anya and I, and probably most of you listening, at some point you get tired of the Kegan Kline story. You get tired of all of the charges that he's faced and the awful details of it. And just imagine how much more tired of it all these prosecutors must be, Courtney Allwine and Jen Kiefer. They have to really basically wallow in this awful material and familiarize themselves with it and be prepared to offer testimony and evidence about it. And so I imagine that they were probably looking forward to closing the book on Kegan Kline today.
Yeah, who wouldn't be? I know we've talked to the Catfish cops. They're two cops from Texas who work a lot of CSAM cases and child exploitation. And, in our conversation with them, this is rough work. And, it's very important work to do. But I imagine that, it's difficult for all of these people who are professionally dealing with this. I don't know. That would be. It's hard for us, and we don't have to look at anything. We just kind of report on what's going on.
One moment that's always stuck in my head at the last hearing, it was necessary for Judge Spar to actually look at some of the images involved, and he leaves the bench to go and look at it. And when he comes back, he's ashen faced. He's really obviously disturbed and upset by what he's seen. And these prosecutors have really had to delve into this horrible material repeatedly for months. Yeah. Because I think Courtney Allwine took over the case in January.
Yeah. And, so it was a lot of familiar faces on the side of the lawyers. We saw Andrew Ackey, who, of course, is Kegan's defense attorney. He was kind of outside of the courtroom a bit, and then he wasn't there for a while. So we were kind of like noting, okay, he's absent. The prosecutors, Kiefer and Allwine, seem to be ready to go. And then you have all these law enforcement folks, lots of turnout from the Miami County deputies. They're always there to kind of ensure everything's running smoothly. And then, of course, a lot of media folks like ourselves who are kind of waiting to see, what's happening. And
by this point, a lot of the media folks, certainly ourselves, and I think the reporters from Wish TV and Fox 59, were aware that there was talk out there that Kegan might be interested in withdrawing his plea.
Yeah, there was a buzz, right? And it's one of those things, we're not going to just hop on on Twitter and tweet that out at that point. But it's like, you're kind of like, okay, this is, and you're also noticing, where's Aki? Where is Judge Spar? Because, he left for this recess in preparation for the Kegan Kline hearing, and he's not back. And that's not normal. Judge Spar's courtroom tends to run very efficiently. I've not seen any sort of delays as of yet, and we've been covering this courtroom for a while, so it obviously was an important thing to kind of be taking some of those central players away. And
at one point, I think maybe around, this hearing is scheduled to start, I think, at 9 a.m., maybe around 9:15 or so. One of the people who works for the court comes in and says, basically, I'm sorry, there's stuff going on. The sentencing is going to be delayed. We don't know when it's going to happen. We apologize.
Yes. And so, then everyone kind of relaxes. And it was delayed for a while. How long did we wait?
Judge Spar entered the courtroom again at 10:18.
So it got delayed by about like an hour and 18 minutes then?
Yeah.
It was a pretty long delay. Maybe you didn't miss anything. It was mostly just people making small talk, or, hey, what do you think? What's going on? Well, we heard this. Okay, well, we heard that. So just kind of people chatting, waiting for things to get started.
And basically what the delay was the parties of the case, the attorneys and stuff, and Judge Spar were behind the scenes trying to figure out what was going on and what to do about it.
Yes. The murder sheet takes a lot of time and effort, whether we're interviewing detectives, digging through archives, or rushing to local libraries to record after a court date. That means that come mealtimes, sometimes it's a bit daunting to try to throw together something that's tasty, healthy, and affordable.
That's no longer a concern thanks to HelloFresh. They're America's #1 meal kit for a reason. You get the convenience of pre-portioned ingredients delivered to your door. This food is healthy and nutritious with so many farm-fresh ingredients. Plus, it's been fun to try out new meals. It takes all of the anxiety out of trying to research recipes and get it right on the first go.
We have also really enjoyed cooking together. It's a way for us to spend quality time together outside of work. The instructions are super easy to carry out, which is helpful because we're both prone to kitchen mishaps. Plus, we both have loved HelloFresh's meals. That's especially impressive because Kevin is very choosy when it comes to food.
My favorite HelloFresh meal was those delicious hamburgers we made some time back. They were topped with melted cheese, tangy sauce, and caramelized onions. The onions smelled amazing, and prep and cleanup were a breeze. If you've been thinking of trying out HelloFresh, we'd strongly recommend it.
Go to HelloFresh.com/msheet16 and use code msheet16 for 16 free meals plus free shipping. Again, go to HelloFresh.com/msheet16 and use code msheet16 for 16 free meals plus free shipping.
The instant #1 New York Times best-selling sensation, The Wager by David Grann, is captivating readers everywhere. This astonishing true story of shipwreck, mutiny, and murder is a grand tale of human behavior at the extremes, told by one of our greatest nonfiction authors. New York Magazine calls him one of the preeminent adventure and true crime writers working today. The Wager by David Grann is now available wherever books and audiobooks are sold.
Because, as you've I'm sure seen the news by this point, Kegan Kline, through his attorney Andrew Aki, asked for a continuance, which basically means I want more time to consider my options. Is that a translation of what that means, Kevin? That's accurate?
Yes. Andrew Aki stood up and said, we want a continuance of this sentencing hearing because Kegan Kline feels he has not had an opportunity to review all the evidence he should have been given. And upon his review of that evidence, it is possible that he may choose to withdraw his plea of guilty.
So, and to be clear, that's what he came out and said once the hearing got underway finally.
Yes.
But prior to that, he was having those conversations behind the scenes with, ultimately Allwine and Kiefer sort of, I think, left their table as well. And I imagine there was some sort of meeting. Maybe Jeff Sinkovich was involved too, him being the prosecutor in the county. I don't know, but I'm just speculating. this is just, they're all working this out in chambers, in judges' chambers, away from the public first, and then kind of coming back and saying, all right, here's what we're going to do.
And I mentioned what Aki said. Kegan wants time to review his evidence. He may withdraw the plea of guilty. In the meantime, we want a continuance. And then Judge Spar asked for Prosecutor Allwine to reply. She stood up and with obvious and understandable anger in her voice, she said, "We obviously object."
She had some really interesting quotes. I mean, very fiery. She
said this is clearly a delaying tactic. Kegan Kline does not want to face the music.
Yeah, that was kind of a very pointed statement from Miss Allwine.
And she also had some very specific replies to some of the allegations. Because basically, when Kegan Kline, when the defense attorney suggests we have not gotten all of the discovery, they're basically saying that the prosecution has done something wrong. And Prosecutor Allwine did not want to let that stand. She said, number one, actually, this discovery that he claims he did not receive until very recently was actually sent on May 12th of last year. And furthermore, she said, basically the point of discovery is to let the defendant know the exact evidence he faces. And this material that he claims he did not receive until very recently is actually his own statements. It's actually like police interrogations and stuff. So he knows what he said. So number one, he got it. And number two, even if he didn't get it, it shouldn't be a surprise because he knows what he said.
She said that it is merely a delay tactic. And, basically what he's asking for doesn't change the evidence, doesn't change any of the argument, and there's no gotcha moment here. She's basically saying the prosecution was playing above board. We did everything right. Him kind of pulling this out at the 11th hour is just a stall.
And she said, he has pled guilty to these charges, and the court has accepted that plea. And she also made the point that we've come here prepared, and the defense should be prepared too. And again, there's no doubt that the prosecution was prepared because they had plenty of witnesses there.
Yeah, they definitely were prepared. And you can definitely understand the frustration on their side with, getting prepared and then feeling like it's kind of being delayed for reasons that you don't necessarily find above board. I think we can all understand that in this situation. At the same time, it's Aki's job to represent his client's interests. And if Kegan is saying, I need more time, then that's what he's going to do, right? I mean, that's his job. So yes. That's also understandable. It's interesting. In the previous hearing we were out with Miss Allwine and Mr. Aki, they both were very even-keeled and even-toned in terms of how they were, conversing and talking with the court. And there's such a marked difference in this hearing. Miss Allwine was very fiery, could tell there's a lot of passion in her voice when she's talking about this, a lot of frustration. And Mr. Aki seemed a little bit more reserved. Is that fair to say?
That's definitely fair to say.
He was a little bit, and so I think, you can kind of just see that when there's more of a conflict there, different styles are going to be maybe more pronounced. It was kind of interesting because,
again, I think it's worth keeping in mind that maybe one of the reasons why Prosecutor Allwine was more fiery in this matter than Defense Attorney Aki was basically the integrity or competence of her office was being called into question.
I think it's an interesting comparison to something that happened in the case against Richard Allen in Carroll County, because in that situation you had the defense lawyers, Andy Baldwin, Brad Rosie, essentially saying, hey, the Carroll County Sheriff's Office, forced our guy to go to Westville, right? And he's incarcerated there and they won't let him leave, basically. And, they've never, that's something that we get their side of it and we kind of get what they're saying, and it's very concerning. And at the same time, you've never had the prosecutor, themselves or allow the Carroll County Sheriff's Office to really respond to that, and I think the sheriff's office in that case would absolutely respond if they could, because they have done so in the past. And I think they want to, I'm sure there's that instinct, like, we need to, defend ourselves here. They can't because of the gag order. So it's just kind of interesting in the two cases where you have, sometimes the prosecutor's office kind of wants to go to bat for itself or whatever law enforcement partners. And then in other cases, it kind of seems a little bit more one-sided where the defense is more of setting the narrative. So it's interesting to see the pushback. And I'm just kind of highlighting those two instances because they just kind of present different strategies.
After Prosecutor Allwine strongly pushed back on this, defense attorney Aki was asked to respond. And he said, well, basically the law gives Kegan the right to withdraw his guilty plea if he wants. He cited Indiana Code Section 3535.14, which actually does basically say that if there is a good reason, the defendant should be able to withdraw his plea of guilty prior to sentencing.
Is it a good like, I'm not saying that this is why Kegan Kline is doing this. I'm certainly not saying that. I'm just trying to think of different options. Like, is it considered a good reason if he's like, oh, I thought I was going to get 5 years, but it's actually 45? Is that a good reason, or is that just can it be any reason? I'm
going to read the relevant part of the statute here. After entry of a plea of guilty, the court may allow the defendant by motion to withdraw his plea of guilty at the time of the crime for any fair and just reason, unless the state has been substantially prejudiced by reliance upon the defendant's plea. The motion to withdraw the plea of guilty under this subsection shall be in writing and verified.
Okay, sounds kind of vague.
It leaves a lot of leeway as to what an acceptable reason might be. Mm-hmm. You could say that if the person making the plea didn't fully understand the consequences he might face, or if there is a discovery issue, that might be reason to reconsider.
I will say the attorneys in this case got a little bit more specific in terms of what at least some of the materials that, are in controversy here.
Yes.
One was specifically noted as, I believe, Chris Cecil's forensic examination report. I believe that was some sort of ISP situation.
That seemed to be, if I understood correctly, some sort of report that had some information about some cell phone interactions. And this is in addition to the statements by Kegan Kline that Prosecutor Allwine alluded to earlier. In other words, defense was claiming that there was some details from this report that they were not given. And the state made a response to that. They said basically what he's saying he didn't get was a piece of demonstrative evidence where they took excerpts from this report and somehow used them to prepare evidence for a trial. I don't know exactly what the exact circumstances of this are. It could be as simple as them taking a key finding of this report, printing it in big letters, and putting it on a poster board. And Prosecutor Allwine made the point that maybe he did not get that piece of demonstrative evidence with this excerpt, but guess what? He got the full report a long time ago. And you shouldn't be able to say that if you take an excerpt from a report you already have, that becomes a new piece of evidence.
Can I run a dumb scenario by you for me to understand that better?
Sure.
Okay, so what if you went to Sears and took a bunch of photos? You had a bunch of photos of your smiling face, and it was just that the photographer gave that to you, and we say that's the evidence. And then I want to show your beautiful smiling face to the jury, so I take one of those photos and I blow it up real big. And then, somebody later says, well, you gave me all the little photos, but not the big one that you blew up to show to the jury. Is that basically what they're saying here?
That's basically what they seem to be saying. Prosecutor Allwine was saying that quote was included in the report you were given. Just because we take that quote and make a new piece of evidence from it by putting it on a poster board or whatever, that doesn't make it a new piece of evidence. If the purpose of discovery is to give the defense notice of information and evidence, then they receive said notice by receipt of that report, is what the argument they were making, to the best of my understanding.
Right. And I mean, should we address here the Delphi question of what, everyone's going to be running with, presumably in certain quarters, now that there's been another delay, which is that, oh my gosh, they're in negotiations and he's about to blow the lid off on Delphi.
There's no negotiations.
Yeah. That's not, we would really encourage you to, when certain creators or specific people are continuously saying stuff and are never correct and seem to be, kind of just conjecturing, we don't need to talk or listen about, we can just cut that off, I think. I mean, this is a situation where obviously Kegan's story is relevant to the Delphi case because it seems to be that is at the very least the way that he got found out to a certain extent, his connection to the case. And at the most, who knows? There might be more information that eventually comes forward that does establish some sort of concrete link, or at least maybe kind of cuts out the possibility that there's a link. We just don't know yet. It's impossible to speculate. But for anyone who goes out and starts acting like what happened today is because of Delphi, no. This is either, if you're looking at it from the defense perspective, Kegan is exercising his rights. If you're looking at it from the prosecution perspective, he's doing a stall tactic because he got freaked out because he could get a lot of years in prison. So that's where we are. It's not, let's not overstate it, right? And let's not, pay a lot of attention when people are just making random claims like that on the internet.
Yeah, there's clearly no negotiations. And again, basically,
Miami County is not going to negotiate with Kegan Kline. And frankly, given the history here, given some of the kind of, things that didn't really pan out seemingly that Kegan has said over time, I would be surprised if that has, I think that's something that can hurt when you hurt your credibility or when your credibility is at a low ebb. People are not going to want to be negotiating with you. And then on top of that, I just don't think Miami County has the political will to negotiate with someone charged with all of this. How does that benefit them? They feel like they have a strong case. They feel like they're ready to go. I mean, why negotiate if you're trying to get the maximum?
Yes. And also, if Kegan wants to enter in negotiations, obviously it would not be a good move to question either the integrity or the competence of the Miami County Prosecutor's Office. Courtney Allwine made very, very clear that these allegations that were being made by Kegan regarding discovery issues were, in her mind, completely unfounded. She said, "We have made every effort to make discovery available to the defense."
She even noted a specific example where she said that Peter Dietrichs, who of course is also in the Miami County Prosecutor's Office, he was running this trial before Ms. Allwine took over. That he and Detective Vito actually went to the Miami County Jail and basically walked through Kegan, everything, all the images, essentially, to show him the discovery. Is that what your understanding of that? Mm-hmm. She's highlighting, here's how much we've gone towards ensuring that he has this. And she also noted that, I think at one point it was stated Aki's typical procedure is to kind of forward whatever he gets with discovery, to his clients immediately. So I think the prosecution was definitely sort of raising questions about how Kegan could have missed any of this. Of course, Kegan's claiming otherwise, but that's something to note. So, I mean, Judge Sparrow always seems to have kind of a sunny disposition, just kind of cheerful attitude. That seemed to be a bit tested to me today, in my opinion. I mean, this is just me kind of reading the kind of mood here, so take it with a grain of salt. But I can't imagine that all this build up, okay, we're finally coming to a conclusion. Oh, wait, never mind. I kind of got the feeling that this was trying his patience a bit too.
And also you have to keep in mind that Judge Sparr theoretically had the power to go ahead with the sentencing if he felt that was the thing to do. In a situation like this, though, when it's not apparent that there is one clear, absolute right answer, you often have to look at your options and say, which mistake would I rather make? Would I rather grant the continuance, even though it is not really justified, and maybe delay sentencing and stuff for a month or so? Or do I go ahead and sentence him and maybe run the risk of being unjust and sentencing a person whose rights were in some way violated? And he chose to go with granting the continuance. He's asking for both sides to provide some briefs on the issue.
Those are due at 11:59 p.m. on Friday, May 26th.
For the defense, and then the prosecution has a couple of days after that.
I think the following Tuesday, perhaps.
And then they're going to have a status hearing about all of this on June 1st, figure out where things stand. And at least in theory, if Kegan does not withdraw his guilty plea, sentencing would be held on July 27th at 9 a.m.
And if he does withdraw his guilty plea, then trial's back on?
In theory.
It's such a rough thing that this is dragging out. Just looking at it, I think your point that Judge Sparr is trying to make the most prudent decision. I didn't really feel like what was discussed made a very strong case for Kegan's rights having been violated here. Certainly, Ms. Alwyn pushed back on that pretty hard. At the same time, I think it's probably, I can understand why Judge Sparr would be like, we'll just like, if we rush this, it could be worse, right? There could be room for appeal down the line. So, there is kind of a benefit to attorneys, kind of working cautiously and judges making cautious moves in a situation like this.
And again, this prosecutor's office has impressed, I think, both of us with their professionalism. So,
I think they probably understand that too. But I imagine it's very frustrating for them in law enforcement here because it's just, and it's like, it's the Lucy with the football metaphor,
All of their witnesses had to clear a day from work and from their other obligations to come here today. And not only that, before they came here today, I assume each of them had to review the evidence and figure out what exactly they wanted to talk about in court. And that could not have been a pleasant process. And to put them through that and make them do that for basically nothing, I imagine is tremendously frustrating.
Yes. And as for Kegan, where does this leave him? A lot of people asked us after he pled guilty, there was so much confusion. Is he making a deal? Is he going to reveal secrets about Delphi? Is he going to do this or that? And, I think one of the things we kind of have come to think is like, we don't know. We can ask him and he can tell us things and that's always helpful. And we appreciate getting his side of the story. But at the same time, he's going to be making decisions I imagine that he feels is going to benefit him in his case. So that can be a bit hard from the outside to necessarily gauge, the strategy behind some of this kind of. I guess I'm saying on the surface, I don't know if this is fair, but on the surface, there seems to be a level of impulsivity here where you are suddenly having, okay, we're going to trial. Here's the witness list. Boom. I'm just going to plead guilty without any sort of deal. And then, here's the number of years I could potentially get. Let me undo that. So, at a certain point, I don't think there's going to be any more room to kind of dance like that, go from one side to the other. But, it definitely could drag things out for a while. What do you think about the possibility of him taking his chances with the jury?
He's a difficult person to figure out because if he wanted to take his chances with the jury, why did he even make the guilty pleas in the first place?
Yeah, that's pretty bad. I'm going to tell you, we were at that hearing. It was not like one of those things you might see in a movie or a TV show where you have, like, how do you plead? Guilty, Your Honor. No. I mean, Judge Spar walked this man through every charge. It took a long time. We were sitting there. It was repetitive. What about this one? What about this one? I mean, basically, we went through the whole thing, what kind of felonies they were, what exactly the charges were, blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, it was not like a kind of a one-off decision of like, I just said the wrong thing at the time. It was very, very thorough. And I kind of feel that like an Indiana jury, whether they're from Miami County or they bring somebody from outside, I kind of feel like, we've heard in the past that there is very much like a lot of anger towards people who are accused of preying on children. And so, that's something to keep in mind. I don't know if a jury would look too kindly on something like this if they felt there was good evidence in the case.
Even if we take Kegan's allegations seriously about discovery, obviously a month ago he felt the evidence against him was so overwhelming that it made sense just to go ahead and admit his guilt. It is difficult to imagine how an excerpt from a report that he'd already seen in its complete form or copies of his police statements, it's difficult to see how those things could exonerate him.
We should add that we did message him today just to kind of get a sense of if he was happy with how things went, and he noted that, he is asserting that his version of events is factual and that the prosecutors are either incorrect or misrepresenting things. So that is what he is saying. I think we can add the normal caveats around, grain of salt and all that. But I think it is fair to kind of put out his side of the story and what he's noting at this time. I think that would be pretty easy to prove that the prosecution, sent or didn't send something when they said they did. So I don't know why I think that would be pretty dumb for them to lie about. And give Aki a real opening because he could be like, no, you didn't see. I just...
And prosecutors Allwine and Kiefer are clearly not dumb.
Yeah, they've been handling things pretty professionally. So I kind of have a hard time believing that they're incorrect on this one. So I'm just giving you my opinion here, but also wanting to give you Kegan's side of it because we did get that from him and we always appreciate getting his side of it. And, we'll kind of include that, but yeah, I just, just everything in all in the Delphi case itself, and then of course some of these tangential cases on the side that, kind of have come up as a result of the Delphi investigation. You always think, okay, we know what's going, we know what's ahead, and then, a bunch of boulders fall in the road and you have to take a crazy detour and you have no idea where you are. So, I mean... And
we keep on thinking things are over. We had, in the course of our research, we found some other interesting Miami County cases from the past that we were thinking, well, once the Kegan Kline sentencing is done, maybe we can talk to Jeff Singovic and see if he would come on and tell our audience about these cases. But guess what? We're not going to be able to ask him about that for a while because the Kegan Kline thing is still ongoing.
What's that? What's in True Detective season 1? Time is a flat circle. Nothing ever changes. Right. Nothing's ever over, man. We're literally both going to become Rest Cole at some point, just carving beer cans with a knife. And
you can probably tell at this point we're pretty sleep deprived. So yeah. I think this is a good time to wrap up. But we will be back in Peru in June and I guess in July.
Yeah, unless something else changes. Or
yes.
Who knows what will happen.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to The Murder Sheet. If you have a tip concerning one of the cases we cover, please email us at murdersheet@gmail.com. If you have actionable information about an unsolved crime, please report it to the appropriate authorities.
If you're interested in joining our Patreon, that's available at www.patreon.com/murdersheet. If you want to tip us a bit of money for records requests, you can do so at www.buymeacoffee.com facebook.com/murdersheet. We very much appreciate any support.
Special thanks to Kevin Tyler Greenlee, who composed the music for the Murder Sheet, and who you can find on the web at kevintg.com.
If you're looking to talk with other listeners about a case we've covered, you can join the Murder Sheet discussion group on Facebook. We mostly focus our time on research and reporting, so we're not on social media much. We do try to check our email account, but we ask for patience as we often receive a lot of messages. Thanks again for listening. Hello, Murder Sheet listeners. Thank you so much for sticking with us until the very end. Just wanted to take a moment as we close out to thank our sponsor, HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. They are #1 for a reason, folks. Kevin and I have been loving the meals we're getting from HelloFresh. We're talking farm fresh produce, protein, all sorts of customizable options to get you exactly what you and your family need. It's very delicious, it's very nutritious, and it's quite affordable. So it ticks off all our boxes. We've been very happy with the service. And, would love for you guys to try it out if you're curious, or if you've tried it out in the past and enjoyed it, get that discount. It's hellofresh.com/msheet16. And then you're going to plug in the code msheet16. You get 16 free meals plus free shipping. You can't beat that. We've really been delighted by it. We work very hard on the podcast. It takes up a lot of time. It's our small business. We really enjoy the work. We enjoy conversing with all of you every week. But at the same time, it's nice for Kevin and I to kind of have something to do outside of office hours, and cooking these meals has been really fun. We're terrible in the kitchen, like disastrous. I mean, like I can tell you horror stories. I probably shouldn't get into it on the podcast, but I mean, some pretty disastrous moments involving our cooking. Nothing life-threatening, but definitely stuff that we tried to be overly ambitious about, and it either went horribly wrong or it ended up costing like way more than it should have because we didn't properly like think about ingredients, and we're not gifted in the realm of the kitchen. But HelloFresh makes us pretend like we are, because everything is so pre-portioned and pre-planned, and the instructions are super clear, so like you're not going to mess it up if you're like us. And if you're good in the kitchen, then it's just less of a hassle, and you get everything that you need. You don't have to run out to the grocery store. So super nice. Try it out. I've really enjoyed the meals that they've sent us so far. I can say that Kevin has too. I highlight that because Kevin is pretty picky when it comes to food. He does not like everything. He has pretty strong specifications and preferences. Very much cares about things like fresh produce and farm produce and things like that. So he's very picky, and I think the fact that he is really enjoying HelloFresh is a testament to the quality here, because he's a stickler for that kind of thing. And so if you are, I think you will enjoy it as well. And again, the URL and promo code that'll get you a sweet discount is hellofresh.com/msheet16. That's MSHEET 16. And use code msheet16. You're going to get 16 free meals plus free shipping. We hope you enjoy it. And again, thank you so much for listening.